Hi, this is Peter Carson, and you're listening to The Joy of Solo Bolo, a new podcast by the good folks at grincetown.com. Now, the origin of this podcast was for me to do something that doesn't take very much time or effort on a regular basis, because I feel that I spend a lot of time doing stuff that I think is going to be amazing, and it takes up weeks or months of my time. And then I basically release it, and once it's out there, it's done. And I don't think about it, I don't promote it properly. I'm just like, oh, it's finished. I just won't touch that again. So I thought with a shorter, sweeter take on something like that, I'll be able to get at least something out there on a weekly basis. So what have I been up to? Oh, not much. Friend of mine came through on Sunday, and we were messing around with his drone. We went up Arthur's Seat, and I got very sunburnt. I think he got sunburnt as well, but I'm the kind of guy who is flaking straight after a sunny day. And I took a look in the mirror earlier, and I was pulling off a full face mask off my flaky face. We got some good drone footage. I might try and edit a couple things today. It's quite limiting when you go out there and you don't have any ideas. I think we had the idea to make like a cop drama or like a James Bond style thriller with the drone footage. And whenever it comes through, I can't be arsed doing anything that involves actual work. And I think he's pretty much the same. He was like, oh, let's improv it. Those things are very difficult to improv, so never got around to it. So yeah, we were just hanging out in the good old city of Edinburgh, going up Arthur's Seat. And then we went to a nice little bar near where I stay called the Cumberland Bar. I hadn't been there before. It's got a really good beer garden for a place that's kind of this south of... I shouldn't say south. This north of Queen Street. It's a really, really good place to go on a hot day. Because usually places like the Pear Tree, the bigger beer garden places, they're just swarming with, people. And that's the one thing you don't want to be seeing in a nice bar on a sunny day. You don't want to be seeing too many of those people out there, because they're all foul smelling and beautiful, and they make you wanna blow them kisses and buy them nice crisp ciders. So it's better to go to a place where it's pretty empty and you've got the place to yourself. But I mean, some other people, they're kind of like, no, I want to go to a place that's busy. I want to go to a place that's got loads of action, where the action is happening. And I'm fine with that, as long as I can get a seat. I hate going to beer gardens on a sunny day, and you're just standing for hours. You're like, oh, I've got my pint that just cost me £5, and I could go sit with these strangers, but I think they might find me a bit of the fool if I go do that. So you're just standing, leaning against a wall, checking your phone in the sunshine, just pretending like this wasn't a fucking terrible idea. But we had a great time at the Cumberland Bar, and then my friend, he came back, and him and his girlfriend, they stayed over at my house. We had a nice sleepover. I don't have many sleepovers recently. Ever since I turned 27, I've been, sleepovers have been on the down low, if I've had any sleepovers. I watched Bob's Burgers episode, I think the day after, about Gene afraid to go to a sleepover. And I think Thomas Middleditch played the kid. He was going over to sleep with a kid. And, it brings back a lot of memories of being afraid of going to sleepovers and stuff, because if it's somebody you don't really know that well, it's like, oh, why am I doing this? And I think that's Gene's sentiment in that Bob's Burgers episode. he mentions, like, I'm the only guy in my class to have not been on a sleepover. And it's like, it's very funny because, you know, I think you might, he's a very smart 11-year-old for a TV show. No kid would be thinking, it was like, I'm the only kid in class that hasn't done it. If you're a kid, you'd be like, oh God, I have to, if only I could take away the painful memories of going on sleepovers. That would be my thought as an 11-year-old. I think sleepovers were a very traumatic thing sometimes if kids were just being kids. I remember we were sleeping over at my friend Finn's house for the premiere of Star Wars The Phantom Menace on terrestrial TV. We were watching Jar Jar Binks. We were seeing Little Annie doing the pod racing, Darth Maul swinging his big stick, and we'd all gone round to his house. It was a big planned event because we must have been about 10, something like that. Star Wars was massive. It was massive then because it was the sort of the redux. I could barely remember anything about the first original Star Wars is because they all just merged together in one shoddily edited together videotape. But with The Phantom Menace, that was the chance for kids to get into Star Wars for the first time without trying to, you know, dig out a videotape, figure out, oh, what's the Force, what's Yoda. It was a film made for children. So we went round to my friend's house, and he had a bunk bed at the time. I think there was maybe 4 of us sleeping in this one room that was very, you know, very small for 4 kids to be hanging out with. And his ceiling had these jagged spikes. It was I think it was technically a council house. We only found that out like a couple of weeks ago. But it was, you know, it was a nice house in like a nice neighborhood. It was right across from where my grandfather stayed. And it had all been done up. It was maybe built in the late 80s, so it was pretty reasonable little bungalow. But the roofs, instead of wood chip, they had these spikes coming out of it. These little, I don't know what you'd call it, these little plaster spikes. I can't remember why, but I jumped from the ladder going to the top bunk up onto the roof. I stabbed my back open with these decorative spikes on the roof. And I think there was other things going on, like none of us could sleep because we're all just antsy kids, just couldn't keep it together. We'd had too many Dr. Peppers. But I think everybody was quite sympathetic to me because I was quite stupid and I'd cut my back open on the ceiling, which is something I haven't seen since or haven't experienced it since. I haven't seen anyone cut their back open on the ceiling. Maybe like cut their back open on a barbed wire fence or something, you know, illicit when you're a teenager. You're like, oh, I fucked myself just coming the wrong way down a back garden wall. But yeah, the ceiling at the Star Wars Phantom Menace on ITV party was quite traumatic. There was another sleepover. I think, you know, maybe a few years after that, sleepovers were more quite intimate and you're like, oh, I have a good friend that I'm having a sleepover with. But there would be occasions where you're sleeping over someone's house and you're like, fuck this person and fuck their entire family. Their family would be like super cagey, like very nice to you if you go around and you're like hanging around for the afternoon. But once it turns into a sleepover, they act like your fucking own parents. And that's a boundary I think a lot of kids are aware that shouldn't be crossed when somebody else's parents are trying to treat you like their own child. It's crossing a line, and I think a lot of kids are aware of that. So there was many times where I'd be going around to people's houses and they'd be like, oh, you can't watch TV past 8:30. I'd be like, what the fuck are we doing then? It was like, oh, we're going to go read books or whatever. And the other kid will be like, Mom, but but you let me watch TV up until 9:30 the other night. And there's be like, nah, but we want to watch fucking Law and Order or some shit. It's the parents' time to watch TV on a Saturday night, so you're kind of shunted. And if that kid doesn't have a second TV with Cartoon Network on it, you're fucked. You're truly fucked. There was a time, actually, I think I would have been maybe 10 or 11, because it was very much like in the PlayStation 1 era. And I remember a good friend of mine, but I guess he wasn't a good friend at the time. They were having a sleepover for his birthday, but it was like, oh yeah, all these other kids can sleep over, but Pete, you aren't allowed to sleep over. And I was like, okay, I don't get that, but you're still allowing me to the party or whatever was going to happen. And they were amping it up. They were like, we're going to get so much candy. We're going to put on PlayStation multi-tap, and we're going to play WCW wrestling, if that was a real wrestling federation. So they're all planning out these activities at school. But then they would bring up the fact that, yeah, but Pete, you aren't allowed to sleep over with us. Only the 4 or 5 of us can sleep over together. You're not allowed to sleep over as well. And I was like, okay, I wonder whose decision that is, if that was the mother, because the mother was quite cagey, or if it was like a conscious decision of my friend who was like, nah, I don't want him to sleep over. I don't think I was that broken up about it until a friend of mine came up to me on the playground and said, hey, those guys that invited you to that party about the sleepover, because you're not sleeping over, they're planning to beat you up. And I was like, okay then, I guess I just won't go. I guess I just won't try and be friends with you at all. And it just sounded like a very weird thing. Now, I wasn't actually too sure, because this kid who told me, he was definitely not invited to the sleepover whatsoever. The more I think about it, I think this was curated by a mother figure who was like, I openly hate some of your friends. Because that was kind of what the situation was like, I think, for a few years. Only some of us were allowed to go in the house. Other ones were like, nah, you're a fucking loser or you're a fucking retard, so we're not going to let you into our house. But, yeah, a friend of mine came up to them on the playground and said, those kids are going to beat you up if you go to that sleepover where you're not actually sleeping over. So I decided, you know what, it's not worth the risk. And it's already been shown to me that they don't really want me there. What the fuck is the point in inviting me if they don't want me there and they're just going to beat me up? So I remember going back home on a Saturday, and it was a very sunny Saturday, and I watched the pilot episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And watching that pilot episode was still not enough for me to be convinced that watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer was something I want to do. Because I would watch later episodes and I would really like the whole Californian, teenager feel. It was a very funny, very fast-paced show. But the pilot, it comes on after The Simpsons. And after you've been laughing at an episode of The Simpsons, this broody, jerky pilot from Joss Whedon, it wasn't enough to keep me going. So there was a lot of weird stuff happening at sleepovers. The one thing I remember, that there was probably no jerking off at sleepovers, which is a thing that I would be led to believe that's something teenage boys are going to be doing at sleepovers. If they find some porn or something like that, they're like, yeah, let's jerk off to this together. That was something I was never a party to. So on occasion, I'd be in a room where like somebody would be showing off their boner, and I'd be like, put your fucking dick back in your fucking pants. But that would be about it. But I do remember there was a guy in our class. No, sorry. So he was a guy I worked with, and he was probably a good friend when I was teenager later on. But I remember he was planning to have a sleepover with this other guy who, I think he was always a bit of a weirdo. But when the sleepover started, they might have been 14, 15, 15, 16 even, because this was some pretty, this was pretty funny shit. He got in the sleeping bag very early, and they were in the house. He got in the sleeping bag very early, and so whenever the guy's sister was coming in the room, because she was like a hot older sister that was maybe like 18 or 19, whenever the sister would come into the room, the kid would start jacking off into the sleeping bag. And when he figured out this guy was jacking off, he just kicked him out into the street. He was like, "You fucking sick fuck! You don't come near my fucking house again!" And kicked him out of the street late at night, just in a sleeping bag, which he's probably jizzed in, and he's got to go home and explain to his parents why he's not allowed at the sleepover, because he's been finding some crafty ways to jerk off in that there sleeping bag. So that was sleepovers. Apart from that, I've been playing a lot of a game called HQ Trivia, and it's a very hard trivia game. I first saw it on the American release. I think I saw maybe some articles about Scott Rogowski and the creator of the show and the app. They were having a little bit of a beef. At least the creator of the show was saying, I can fucking fire Scott Rogowski in a heartbeat and have somebody new. And then Scott Rogowski went on and just made jokes the whole time about him on the edge of losing his job. It's very funny when a creator of something just thinks they're so self-important that they can cut off the face of their company within not even 2 months of launching. This HQ Trivia launched in like Q3 2017, and within a couple months, the guy who created it was like, "This is so big, I can just fucking cut off everyone." And thankfully that hasn't happened. Scott Rogowski is still a big part of HQ Trivia. It's a very fun game, but I haven't won any goddamn money off it so far. I got up to question 7, question 8. That's probably the farthest I've come, without any extra lives or anything like that. I don't know. I don't have any things like that. I think there's a little bit of favoritism to iOS players. They seem to have app updates that are quite automatic, or I don't know actually. Maybe it's the other way around. Maybe Android automatically updates, because there's all sorts of features that I'm meant to be seeing, and I just don't see that. But in my quest to win money with very little effort, I found a different show called... let me figure out what it's called. It was called something pretty rubbish. Okay, there's one called KO Trivia, and that one is kind of bullshit. It's like, it's kind of always on. There's no live presenter, but you are winning very small amounts. Like the one I just clicked on there said, "Oh yeah, win 5 cents," and it goes directly to your PayPal account. But be warned, might take 5 days to show up in your transactions. 5 days for 5 cents. Who's gonna be fucking waiting around for 5 cents? And then the highest I've seen is $20, and But there was this other one, Cash Show, which I've I played earlier today, and they actually have higher seed money than HQ Trivia. They're offering up to £1,000 each game, whereas HQ Trivia's daily games usually going around £550. And so, it was the first time I played it, and I actually got all the questions right. And, out of £1,000, and how many people won? I won £2.30. But that's a lot more than I've won on HQ Trivia, which is absolutely nothing. It's clunkier, it's uglier. The host is, I don't know, he's a weird guy, and he seems to be giving hints before the questions and stuff, which for me was like, why would you do that? You're kind of giving the answers away so the money is split up in more people. I don't know. He gave a very big hint to a question, which is about what is a group of frogs called? Like, what would you call, like, a murder of crows or something like that? And the answer was an army of frogs. And before that, the other two were like a colony of frogs, a regiment of frogs. Fair enough, they all sound quite militant. I think I'd heard the army of frogs thing a couple days before. I'd heard that on a podcast or something when they were talking about all the ridiculous ones. But he gave such a big hint, and he was like, "Oh, you guys," and it might have been like a double fake out or whatever, because a lot of people did not pick the most obvious answer, and it was a right obvious answer. The rest of the questions were kind of luck and chance. There was one about Nintendo, and there was one about crypto, and those were kind of wild guesses, but I got them both right, and I was like, fuck, I should have got them both right. I'm pretty sure the guy from Nintendo is called Tanaka. Tanaka's song, that was the answer to one of the questions. But anyway, having fun with phone quiz shows, which is something that's kind of, it's keeping me going. Recently, I submitted 2 monologues to the BBC's Biggest Weekend for a chance to make a minute-long film accompanied by one of my monologues. They were doing one for each city. My city was Perth, and so I wrote 2. I wrote one under my actual name, and it was about a guy who tries through persistence to just live in the slam tent as long as he can. And then in the end, the managers of the slam tent are like, you know what? Let's give him a camp bed. Let's let him sleep in the slam tent tonight. So that was the first one. These are meant to be funny as well. This one was more like the guy had some sort of depressive disorder that was like, the only time I feel alive is in the slam tent, so you've only got 3 days of the year to enjoy that. The other one was about a story that my dad told me on the radio. We were actually driving somewhere the weekend of a Tea in the Park festival, and Radio 1 used to do big coverage of Tea in the Park. It would be like all weekend we're at Tea in the Park, and then they'd maybe have live sets at night, or performances that were recorded during the day. I really miss that. I really miss the sheer amount of coverage that happened at Tea in the Park when it was at Bellado, because we lived near Bellado, and it was just like, it always felt like close to home. When it moved to Strathallan, it didn't feel close to home, because they kind of fucked it up so much. It was closer in proximity, but it seemed like they killed the festival when they did that. And I mean, of course there's always going to be hiccups when you move a festival to a new location, but the fact that Tea in the Park wasn't able to cut down on its yearly rape statistics, yearly rape and murder stats, made me think the festival was not such a great place to be. I was talking to our friend Leah about it, maybe at New Year, and we were like, "Oh yeah, I used to go every year to the park. Used to go every year, but been a lot of rapes happening recently." No, what she said was it was just overblown with neds, which had some very real truth to it. Because when I was a kid and I went to Tea in the Park, when I was a very young kid, neds weren't in sort of my field of view. I would see hippies, sort of hippies everywhere, and Tea in the Park had a lot of that. There was lots of families that would take their kids and things like that. And the first couple of years I would go to Tea in the Park, it was like smart, cool, cosmopolitan sort of people from all over Scotland. And of course there's neds everywhere. But then as the years went on, it would be, I think it was 2010 was the year I went, where folk were coming over to your campsite maybe once every 10 minutes, either trying to buy drugs from you or sell you drugs. And I mean, that had never happened before, where people are like coming over going, "Oh, you got any sweeties? Any sweeties?" And basically your whole weekend turns into drugs. And I wasn't sure if that was because of my age and the age of the people I was with, sort of growing up and doing more drugs, because in the years before, we'd probably not done many drugs at all. We'd maybe had just drunk in excess, like ridiculous amounts of alcohol, and maybe smoked a little bit of Mary Jane, maybe smoking a J out the tent in the morning time. The exception being my friends who went to the herbal drugs tent and spent about 50 to 100 quid on fake drugs on the first day, and then they were throwing up all morning in the campsite, to the ire of everybody else in the campsite. And the only person I remember was James Scott, who was such a funny fucker. He was just going around to my friend, just slapping on the back, going, "Get it all out! That's a good boy!" Just because it was... Everybody else was so excited to be waking up on the Saturday of Tea in the Park, and my friend had already overdone it. Those guys, they were well into their drugs in the early days, and then a couple of years passed, and then it was the campsite morphed into drugs, and a lot of the people that I used to camp with were no longer there, and it became, a little bit sad, because a lot of the conversations, a lot of the talk was just all about taking drugs. And I love dance music and I love going to enjoy the music and stuff, but it was sort of an unhealthy relationship with just the amount of drugs that people were taking, and people were getting taken to the medical tents and things like that. And I was just like, just stop being such fucking pussies and take drugs, and don't fucking talk about it. Just do them, go have your weekend, because that's what it was like before. Everyone was on drugs, but they weren't fucking showing off. But it came to this point where people are maybe, was I 18? I was maybe 18, 19, and it just everybody's taking drugs, and it just got fucking so boring so quick. So it came to a point where I didn't care about Tea in the Park anymore and just stopped going. And I think that's what Leah was getting at with her comment about it's getting full of nets. Yeah, and the crime thing was also a different factor. The first couple of years we went, we didn't really hear anything about, crime happening. We'd maybe hear about medical things, people getting sunstroke, people getting taken to medical tents and things like that. But I'm pretty sure in 2010, like the first night, because they'd opened up this whole new sort of campsite that was kind of a horseshoe. It was like cornered off. There was a guy who was raping folk. There was a guy who maybe raped 2 girls in like the space of an hour, and then the cops were like cornering him in this one campsite, which there was no real exit. They fenced it off, and they basically fenced in a ton of campers with a rapist for about 3 hours on the Friday night, and it was like a showdown. It was like everybody knows about this big rape that's happened, and these things like that continued to happen over the weekend. There was people who were getting very badly beaten up, and there was people who were straight up murdered in like what people said were like drug induced fits of murder. I don't know if that's a real thing, but when it came to the murders and the rapes, it was like, sometimes people go missing at campsites, and some people overdose on a bad strain of things. These things just seem to overshadow the event, and also the music started to get kind of shitty. That was the other thing. R.I.P. Tina Park. The next time I go to Tina Park will be as a performer on the BBC introducing stage with my guitar drum combo, These Dirty Noses. It's a band that I'm just coming up with just now. It's me, a man, on the guitar and singing, and then her, a woman, on the drums. Because that basically seems to be every indie rock combo they had on the introducing stage. It's like, a guy, he plays guitar. It's a girl on the drums. Do they have a bassist? No, they've got a backing track. Sets them apart. The last thing I would like to talk about today is cops signing off for the last time on the radio.
C106, go ahead.
This will be my last transmission on the radio.
Copy, 6106, 10-7. Congratulations on your retirement.
I've been seeing a lot of these videos where cops in the States, specifically, cops being filmed in their patrol cars, signing off for the last time. And yeah, I've seen a couple of these videos where these cops, on their last day, they've made it to retirement, they're doing their last sign off on the radio, and they're crying. They're just flowing with tears as the people, the dispatchers, whoever, are just responding on the radio, on the chat, just being like, "Oh, good luck, officer T13." And then the other officer just keeps blabbing off. He's like, "It's been an honor to serve the South Texan Florida Police Service in this city." And the dispatcher's like, it was an honor. It was an honor to serve with you, I guess. I can't believe it's my last day on the force. And everybody has to be like, "Oh yes, I liked Officer 135 or whatever code. Yes, Officer 135 was a great guy." And the guy's still crying on the radio, going, "You don't know how much this means to me on my last day on the force." The dispatchers are just like, "Fucking Jesus Christ, give it a rest. It's your duty to serve. It's been a duty. It's been a duty. It's been a duty to serve." And they just have to keep responding like, "Yeah, I like Officer 134. He was a good co-worker." They obviously don't give a fuck about this guy crying on his last day of service. "It was such an honor to serve the county." Yeah, Officer 134, didn't you kill an unarmed black child the other day? "Yeah, it was an honor to serve and to do justice." Didn't Didn't you rape someone that was in your custody? It was an honor to be a police in this county and, serve the people, serve the public. I thought you sold government weapons to an Oklahoma militia group. And it was my honor to... Basically, if you're a cop and you're signing off, crying... Fucking stop texting me. If you're a cop signing off for the last time on your dispatcher's radio, and you're looking for support from those other people, those other poor dispatchers that had to put up with your racist bullshit, just think about all those times that you murdered people. Think about all those times that you broke the law, and then when somebody else did it, you were a complete hypocrite and you beat the fuck out of them. Stop fucking texting me. Fuck off. God, he's so fucking annoying. He's so fucking annoying, isn't he? If you're an officer of the law, signing off for the last time, looking for somebody to share the moment with you over your radio, tough fucking luck. Nobody gives a fuck. People retire every day. Dispatchers, they got enough shit to be dealing with. Oh yeah, there's a house burning down in South Dallas. Gotta get some people out there. And then a cop chimes in, listen up everybody, it's Officer T31. I'm signing off for the last day in 31 years. Oh, not another fucking cop retiring. Gotta get a fucking fire engine out. Save those children. And I just wanted to say that I hit those bodies. Oh, shut up. Stop fucking crying. Alright, thank you very much for listening to The Joy of Solo Bolo. Thank you very much for listening to The Joy of Solo Bolo. I'll maybe catch you again next week for another little pep talk. Another little pep talk here at Grincetown Media. Good night, everybody.